Ladies and gentlemen, we're now live on Facebook as well as live on this broadcast, this webinar. I see we have 94 participants in the room at the moment, in the webinar at the moment online. I trust you're hearing me loud and clear. I trust you can see the opening screen about the founding meeting of the Ministerial Renewable Energy Sector Engagement Forum. We're going to start at 13:45 sharp, and I see it's 13:44 right now. So we're kind of just getting ready to kick off things again. And bear with me while I get myself prepared. Okay, I think I'm ready. And it's now 13:45. I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen. And I see that my presenters are lined up and ready, and I hope that we can go. I'm going to start recording now. Yes, okay, we're now recording the proceedings of the afternoon session of the Ministerial Renewable Energy Sector Engagement Forum. We've had a very busy and productive morning, I believe. The Minister has indicated that the proceedings have exceeded his expectations, and he is fully supportive of the need for a smaller, duly constituted, representative and legitimate engagement forum that he can engage with the renewable energy sector on the substantive issues facing South Africa and the electricity supply industry, and the role that renewable energy can play in this post-COVID-19 recovery period that we are all so badly looking forward to. So we're now in the afternoon session, and just to summarize, we're going to have 3 presentations, followed by some questions and answers from you, the audience. I'm going to try hard to manage this as best I can. There's a lot on my plate, and I'm still learning, as I'm sure we all are, with this new technology and dealing with it and getting familiar with it. So please forgive me if we have a few slip-ups as we struggle to get to grips with these new technologies. So after these 3 presentations, each one will have a Q&A session. It'll last about half an hour, each session. And then we're going to start addressing really the purpose of today. First of all, to get your support for an ongoing, smaller engagement forum. We're going to do a live poll. I'm going to ask you to indicate your support. You will see the questions on the live poll. We're looking forward to your answers. It's very important to us to get your support and feedback, and both on the question of a Ministerial Renewable Sector Engagement Forum, as well as on a drafting working group for the Ministerial Renewable Energy Engagement Forum, a smaller working group that will prepare a working paper as well as an agenda to set the work for this ongoing forum, which will then deal with the substantive issues. So today, I must assure you, is not about dealing with the many, many substantive issues facing the country, facing the electricity supply industry, facing Eskom, facing the renewable energy sector, and many other sectors as well. We're not here to talk about the substance. What we're here to do is set the tone, the posture, and the way forward for the establishment of an ongoing forum, because these issues will not be solved in one meeting or one webinar, but will have to be solved, in the months and the years ahead. So without further ado now, I'm going to call on our first presenter. The presenter is Stanley Semelani. He's a researcher and energy specialist at the CSIR Energy Center in Pretoria. He's been doing a lot of work on the just energy transition, and he's going to give us some input on the just transition. So Stanley, I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to ask you to switch on your microphone and your video and to start your presentation. Please, can you proceed, Stanley?
Thank you, Chris. I hope I am audible. I did try to switch on my video, but let's see. You cannot start video because you...
Let me see if I can start video from here. I'm trying to, if you can guide me, I can make you a co-host, and that may enable you to start your video. I'm not sure. Shall I try that, Simelane?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm making you a co-host now, and I'm hoping that that should enable you to start your video. Yes, I can see you there, Simelane, and feel free to share your screen if you have a presentation. We can see you loud and clear and hear you loud and clear and see you very clearly as well. And if I can ask you, Simelane, and thank you for your attendance today, and thank you for agreeing to give us a presentation. I see you've started screen sharing, and we can see your slide on the screen right now. So I will say over to you, and you've got 15 minutes to make your presentation to be completed by 2:10.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Stanley Simelane. As Chris has mentioned, I'm from the CSR Energy Center and from a group called Energy Industries. So I am going to be very brief to share some of the thinking we have around the just energy transition. So mainly, there's two drivers that are pushing the energy transition in South Africa. CO2 being one of them. Of course, South Africa, as mentioned earlier, is committed to reduce carbon emissions through the Paris Agreement. And the second one is the fact that some of the resources that have generated electricity for many, many years will deplete at some point. But I think the big driver here is around reducing carbon emissions. So in the context of the National Development Plan, I think it's important to have a reliable, efficient energy that will align to social equity and also promote environmental sustainability. So that's very important. So energy transition is critically important for South Africa, mainly because coal sector is one of the largest contributor in the GDP in South Africa. That's so they create about 92,000 jobs. There's 170 indirect jobs that are created by this sector. And South Africa created about 129 billion in sales in 2017. And we are in a country that has a very high unemployment rate when you compare us with countries in developed countries or other developing nations like ourselves. So we are sitting around 29% of unemployment rate, and that is the challenge. So that simply means that as we are going to shut down, as the ESCOM uses the word, some of the power stations, there might be implications in terms of jobs that are created. So this slide, it is directly from the RIP 2019, the gazetted one. So just showing the phase out, you're going to lose about 11,000 megawatts and between now and 2030. So, and what we've been seeing happening in the international market, South African coal exports have been declining, and they look like they're going to continue to decline. And in 2018, 48% of the South African export that went to India, but India has already indicated that they are planning to reduce that. So you can see which direction. And maybe if you look more detailed in the slide, about 10 years ago, we are one of the top 4 coal exporters. We are not even top 8 now, if you compare. So you realize that the coal demand is going to continue to decline internationally. So if we zoom into the coal regions, particularly these 2 municipalities are circled in red, Steve Tshwete and Emalahleni, that's the Middelburg area, and Witbank. realized that they have an unemployment rate of about 29% in Emalahleni and 21% in Steve Tshwete. And realized that generally in the country, we're sitting at about 29% unemployment. And what's important to highlight in this slide is that Statistics South Africa only counts those that are actively looking for employment when they configure our unemployment rate. So that simply means already in these areas, you are just having between 35–40% people that are unemployed, if you include those that are excluded from this calculation. So if you had to phase out coal or shut down these power stations, these numbers are likely to increase if there is no plan in place. So Mpumalanga obviously will be directly impacted. If you look on my far right on the red bar, you'd realize that about 25% of that entire economy is dependent on coal. And everything else, manufacturing, wholesalers are somehow linked to the coal economy. So that simply means that if you are phasing out the coal power stations and phasing out the coal sector there, you are likely to really impact every contributing sector or every economic sector that is available there. As a result, I think there's a plan that is required. So on this slide, I'm sharing what we've done in the CSR since 2018. So we visited these areas, Emalahleni and Steve Tshwete, just to have a look, and we did some economic profiling of those areas to look which economic sectors they can diversify to. We've done some IJDI modeling, which is the international jobs, economic development impact models. So basically we quantify how much jobs can be created per megawatt of electricity that has been deployed. So we've looked at manufacturing assessment, particularly of renewable energy components. So we've assessed that to see which areas can this area probably manufacture. We've assessed the resource that is there, both wind and solar resource that is available there. Most recently, we conducted a study commissioned by the Rest for Africa Foundation, looking at the reskilling framework for coal sector phase out in South Africa. So that's some of the research that we've done. We've looked at the LCOE calculations around Hendrina area to see if anything could be deployed, including looking the resource that is there. So that's the research that we've done within the CSIR. So maybe a key thing to say from my side is that the localization of renewable energy technologies is important. Is an important part rather of the energy transition in South Africa. So there is an opportunity to localize some of these components. However, that is one dependent on a consistent procurement that investors would know to say if you invest in a plant that will manufacture some of these components, you want to ensure that there's going to be demand. And maybe there's an opportunity to also, we did a study called the SADC Foresight for the 14 member states within SADC. And yeah, there's an opportunity to tap into that market in terms of supplying those components. But the thinking and or the reflections from all the member states, South Africa cannot do everything. So we can decide which type of technology you like to localize. So yeah, we've done studies on local manufacturing assessments. So we've covered this study on the reskilling, looking at the net jobs directly from the 2019 IRP, Integrated Resource Plan. We've looked at the skills that are required for solar PV and wind sector. We've tried to assess if can some of the coal sector workers relocate to areas with opportunities. So we put together a framework in terms of what skill sets are required. And most of the skills, or maybe let me say some of the skills, are highly skills that these sectors require, but some are semi, particularly on the construction and operations and maintenance side of things. So those are the type of skill sets that are required. So yeah, we're presenting this report, as I mentioned, to Rest for Africa. So here I'm just on the slide depicting to say we have Mpumalanga area that has a lot of power stations. In that area between Nkangala and Gersibande area, and you find that most of our renewable energies have been really deployed between Northern Cape for solar, Western Cape and Eastern Cape mainly, although we have some projects also in, I think, few projects in Mpumalanga and Northwest, but mainly there's been in that area. However, we still have a grid infrastructure that can be utilized to transmit power if there's any deployment in coal phase out region. So it is important to then to make sure that we repurpose some of the power stations. So we know, for example, that Eskom has announced to say they'll retire some of the plants or shut them down. So there's an opportunity to really repurpose those power stations, and we've seen different ideas and technologies that could really be deployed there. But I think what is important to say is that a cost-benefit analysis, if you like, is required to see which option is the best, particularly socio-economic best option, because you are likely to impact jobs that are currently created by the coal economy. So this is directly from the IRP, Integrated Resource Plan. These are the net jobs. So it's on your far right. You are losing about between 2018 and 2030, 46,219 jobs. But you are sitting at 229 jobs, and based on the 2019 IRP, you are adding about 15.3% of jobs. That's the plus 34,997 jobs. And we know the value chain, how it's structured. Most of the jobs are during construction, but if the construction is going to be consistent, and you're not going to have gaps, then you are at least able to sustain these jobs that you are really, that you can create. But this is directly from the RIP to see if, as it was gazetted, to see what does it, well, how many jobs does it create. So that's the actually net jobs that you're getting from the RIP. Then a just energy transition, of course, will have an impact in South Africa. So it's important to make sure that we cover the socio-economic issues, net jobs that I just spoke to. Deploying renewables, of course, reduces carbon emissions, creating new industries which will stimulate these regional economies is quite important. Of course, the cost of energy per kilowatt hour is one key element that is so important. So we know these technologies, and I heard the minister earlier on mentioning that he supports the least cost. So we know technologies that are much cheaper. So it's good to support that, and the mixed energy mix that is in the IRP is really supported. So, and we have a potential to export hydrogen into countries like Japan that have shown interest to import hydrogen, and we can use the green hydrogen generated by renewables and CO2 to create methanol and other synthetic fuels. So that's the opportunity there. So, and we can increase the energy security through that and support the principles of universal energy access. And these type of technologies, some of them, they are very flexible. So you can really respond to changing economic growth and energy demand. So yeah, that's what we cover in there. So maybe before I get to my last slide, I think the key enablers that are important for a South African just energy transition. One, we need to map the just energy transition framework for South Africa. That's something that is currently non-existent, and it has to be in place. That's one. I think we need to establish partnerships and create a platform for a social dialogue, particularly with municipalities affected about this. The labor is a key stakeholder, and other NGOs and players that are operating in this space. There has to be a social protection, of course, to secure some of those salaries and pensions and all those employees that are affected by the transition. And perhaps then investing in infrastructure and trying to diversify these economies, creating reskilling opportunities is something that is fundamentally important as South Africa gets on this coal phase out journey. And maybe one thing that is important is that to mention is that the coal shutdown is not happening all at once. We are not closing all the power stations in 1 year. It's going to happen gradually, and that gives all the decision makers to have a chance to plan, to see how they're going to manage the coal decommission as we transition our energy system. There's an opportunity, of course, to localize some of the renewable energy components. And I think here, what is important is to be competitive. We need to make sure that we are competitive, and we've run numbers using what we call a minimum sustainable price, and we are comparing with the spot price in terms of what the Chinese companies are selling at, and the numbers are not really looking good. We find that some of the internal rates of return are much lower, negative net present values, but for this to be sustainable, then it has to be subsidized. It's not just about the policy certainty, but if you're going to localize some of the components, the components that really can be competitive. So that's important to mention. Then we need to understand trade-offs, because as I highlighted earlier, to say coal export is going to decline over the next coming years. And it's important to understand, to say, are there any other areas that we can focus on to create a more balanced trade-off? Lastly, we need to deploy evidence-based decision support tools like techno-economics, to be able to make sure that we invest and have these decision enabling tools that will assist us to choose the best options as we transition our energy system. So yeah, that's basically that from my side. I think what is important, I've just tried to put together some of the key stakeholders that we think are going to be important as we phase out. And we'll see on the bottom line where I speak about studies, there's many studies that could be conducted outside the energy business, looking at a new economic opportunities and trying to diversify those economies. Yeah, thank you. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Sebalani, for that presentation. I hope it's come across loud and clear to everybody. My apologies, I had to log off and reboot in the middle of your presentation, Sebalani, so I missed a little bit of it, but I'm back online again. These crises come to try us. I would like to ask anybody who's got some specific questions, and I do see one from Leon Viljoen that I'd like to pose to you. Please, ladies and gentlemen, no grandstanding, no long discussions, no punting your products and systems and technologies, but focused on asking Stanley the questions. Stanley, you seem to have switched off your video. You're welcome to keep your video on.
Okay, perfect.
Whilst we take these questions. And I will read out the one from Leon Viljoen. He says, Stanley, you emphasize the continuous implementation of renewable energy and not repeating what we did in the past to ensure net jobs are positive. This is extremely important. your comments further, please.
Can you just repeat that for me?
Yes, certainly, Stanley.
Sure.
It's a question from Leon Viljoen. He is the representative of SIFSA, that is the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of South Africa, a body of manufacturers in the engineering and electricity field. He comments as follows. You emphasize, Stanley, the continuous implementation of renewable energy and not repeating what we did in the past to ensure net jobs are positive. This is extremely important, that there should be a continuous implementation and not a stop-start process. Can you elaborate and give us your comments on that, please, Simelane?
Certainly, I think that's one important part, and maybe there are things that I did not say, but it's important to understand that our energy demand, if you compare it to countries like India, it's just a fraction. So it's important to make sure that if we are going to try to establish manufacturing plants, somebody has to demand those components. And the demand of those components somehow is dependent on procuring renewables. So if there is no procurement, even if you establish a plant, that plant cannot really be sustainable. So the only way to sustain plants is if there's demand. And maybe you can look at other markets outside South Africa to try to sustain those plants. But the message that I'm trying to put across there is that if we really want to support local manufacturing, then the procurement side of things, and that is the policy side, has to be consistent. And we cannot then stop and go, as he puts it.
Thank you very much indeed, Simelane, for that answer. I'm going back a little bit now to two questions that were asked earlier. Let me first deal with Ntumba Katabua. He asks, what is the expected impact on tariffs with the growth of renewables in the production mix? What has been observed in other countries? Are you able to answer that, Simelane?
I can try answer it. I can tell you particularly, because we've measured the resource, so I have a more specifically, when I say the resource, the wind resource and the solar resource are available in the areas that are phasing out coal power stations. Because when we speak about just energy transition in South Africa, we cannot just ignore the coal regions. So what I can tell you is that the resource in the coal regions is not great. It's not the greatest resource like you'd have in Northern Cape, for example. But the difference and the cost premium is not really that much. So there's about between 10 to 12% difference between the solar resource available in the Northern Cape and in some areas around Middelburg and Hendrina area. So that I've measured myself. So there are pockets of areas that have a really good resource. Of course, it is not great like the Northern Cape. And of course, in terms of the tariff, then the tariff, if you were to deploy renewables in such area, of course, you're not gonna get your cheapest tariff that you'll get in a Northern Cape. And I think as part of a just energy transition, those are some of the key policy decisions that can really make sure that we mitigate potential socioeconomic impacts that are likely to transpire in areas that are phasing out the coal economy.
Thank you, Simelane. Please do feel free, Simelane, to switch on your video if it's not already on. It's great to see you as we engage. I'd now like to pose a question from Mandy Rambaras. You may remember Mandy is the representative of Eskom, gave a presentation earlier, and she is, I understand, the head of the Just Energy Transition Office, the newly established Just Energy Transition Office at Eskom. So she's a very important player in the just energy transition going forward. Many thanks, Simelane. We can see you on the video now. And could you answer this question from Mandy? She says, thanks, Stanley. It was an excellent presentation. Interested that you spoke about hydrogen for export. Do you not see a potential for green hydrogen here and potentially being accelerated to replace other transition fuels?
It's Mandy, that's spot on. In fact, my personal view is that I see Sasol playing a lot, a future Sasol playing a lot in this space. I think there's an opportunity to create a very strong hydrogen economy for South Africa, as well as and if you think about our oil and gas space and how that really affects our rand-dollar exchange, there's an opportunity as well within when you think about EVs and other fuels that you can use for the transport sector. So I think hydrogen is not just, maybe I mentioned that an example to say Japan has said that they'll import hydrogen at a particular price by 2030, but I think there is an opportunity for hydrogen economy in South Africa, most certainly.
Thank you, Simelane. I just want to acknowledge Greg Austin. I can see your hand is up and we will get to you, I promise you. And anybody else that would like to pose a question to Simelane, please put your hand up so that I can see you and schedule into the answers. I see Jacob Mbele's hand is up. I see Vikesh's hand up. Oh, a lot of hands are going up now. Wonderful. But before we do that, I just want to get onto a question here. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm doing my best, getting my tongue around some complicated names. Yongikaya Witi. Yogikawa asks the question as follows, Stanley. He says, good presentation, Stanley. You mentioned the need for a just energy transition planning framework. In your view, what are the key elements of such a framework?
Okay, thanks, Jongi, for your question. I think there's a reason when I started the presentation, I showed how much does the coal sector contribute. I did that intentionally. And the last bullet there spoke about the high unemployment rates that we have in South Africa. So one, I think a decision has to be taken to say, do you want the cheapest electricity with the hope that it will stimulate your economy and create jobs? Because some engineers I do research with think in that way. Or do you want to really have a just energy transition that will generate some of these components? Because remember, although we always say it's not wise to compare the value chains, at some point you'd realize that the current coal value chain, you have people that mine coal, working from mining companies, you have people that transport coal until it gets to the power station and then we burn that coal. On the other value chain, you have a free resource, which is the sun, or sometimes it's the wind. So you lose those jobs. And you have countries that have really invested in R&D and they've advanced and they're creating some of these renewable energy components really cheaper. So in some areas, we cannot compete. So do you want to have a cheap electricity or do you want to create jobs? So I think for South Africa, as I understand it as a South African, I think what's more important is to try to create some jobs. So that's why localization of these components is a critical component. But you cannot localize because in terms of the World Trade Organization principles and rules, sometimes localization is perceived as a negative policy, and countries like India have been fined around that. So one, we've agreed that the key driver is the CO2, and South Africa has ratified the Paris Agreement. So we understand we want to reduce our carbon emission. That's one. So a framework that reduces carbon emissions, that's correct. A framework that will optimize jobs that can be created as we transition, that's important. Reskilling, because this is an area, I always say we've always had the sun. So if you look at our temperatures, but for some reason, it's only maybe in the past 10 years that we really started to look at renewables, but the resource has always been there. And so what I'm trying to get at is then we need to reskill because we are behind if you compare to countries that are really leading in terms of manufacturing this component as we speak. So you have to reskill and invest in reskilling. And if you're going to reskill people, then you need to make sure that you are going to not drop the ball, if you like, or you're going to continue and really procure and sustain, because it should be pointless to train people around these new technologies that we adopting, and then a few years later, there is no procurement, there is no demand. And the biggest challenge is that our energy system now, if as we speak, it's not even 50 gigawatts. And you compare this to all these other countries like China and India, they have a much bigger energy system compared to us. So it's either we're going to depend on exporting into the sub-Saharan region, which has a great resource. Most of the countries have a greater than 5 kilowatt hour per square meter in terms of solar. That is an opportunity. But South Africa cannot do all the components. So that's number 3. That's the reskilling. I think for me, those are the 3 key things that are important. You want to create jobs, but you also want to be sustainable and meet our Paris Agreement commitments. So we want to make sure that as we are trying to be sustainable, we try to localize some of these components. We try to reskill and make sure that at least most South Africans can get an opportunity to leverage some of these opportunities.
Thank you, Simelane. I do see Greg Austin's hand. I see Vikesh's hand is up. But really, I would like to take this opportunity to go to Jacob Mbele. Jacob is a very critical player in the South African sector. He has driven the IRP 2019 process. We're honored to have him here. He's actually standing in now for the minister because the minister has signed out for the afternoon as a result of his COVID-19 diagnosis yesterday, and we wish him everything of the best. Jacob, I'm going to switch on what is called allow you to talk so that you can ask your question directly to Simelane. Can you switch on? Yeah, that's great. Jacob, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. Chris, I think Mr. Simelane has actually touched on the question that I wanted to raise, which was in relation to what I call the type of jobs. You know, when he touched on, earlier when the DG made the opening remarks, he said that we tend to talk past each other. And this is because sometimes we're solving different problems. When one looks at the presentation, yes, it talks about creating jobs, but these are the jobs that are created at what one would say that the early stage, which is construction, because it is in the upstream of the value chain to supply equipment. When you compare it to the jobs in the coal environment, these are the jobs that contribute to each megawatt that comes out on each day. So effectively, if a mine is there for 30 years and a power plant is there for 30 years, then it means those jobs will be there for 30 years. So I think he already, because I was going to go to that point and ask him if in reality we can sustain jobs when we transition to renewable energies by continuous procurement, when we know that energy is a supply and demand issue. So when demand find another way of satisfying itself, obviously you would not necessarily continue to procure. So I think it already touched on that point, but I believe that we oversimplify the job creation part or the job replacement part of the discussion, especially in the transition discussion. Whereas, yes, we're going to create jobs, but it's not the same type of jobs. And those jobs are possibly even not likely for the same people. So even when we talk about reskilling, we might have to reskill, but not necessarily in the energy sector, but somewhere else, because of the type of jobs that will be created.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment, Jacob. And Stanley, would you like to wrap up now? This is going to be the last question, unfortunately. We've run out of time. So if you can reply with your comment to Jacob as short as possible, please, so that because we are now overdue for the next presentation.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Mpele. I think, Setsen, I want to agree, and there's a reason that I had trade-offs, because some of the trade-offs that you might find that they are not in the energy business. So we need to look what is best for South Africa, which other sectors can we really diversify into. So for example, when you speak to agriculture people, they see water that can be available in the cold regions as something that they can utilize. I see PV being deployed to rehabilitate some of the land. And I would always say you must always compare how much does a coal miner earn relative to how much to somebody that works in a farm would earn. And we need to make sure the areas that we choose as part of the transition would then try to compensate as the coal sector would compensate. I think that's it from my side. Thank you.
Simelane, and I must apologize for calling you Simelane throughout this. I should be calling you Stanley, and somehow my brain didn't get around that you are Stanley Simelane. So my apologies for referring you to you as Simelane throughout this presentation. This is Stanley Simelane, and thanks for a wonderful presentation. It has really set the scene for further presentations. If I could ask you, Simelane, to switch off your Stanley, to switch off your microphone. Thank you very much. And I'm now going to move on to our next presenter. But before I do so, will you just bear with me? I'm just doing a few little housekeeping issues on Zoom. And I introduce you now to Fumani Mtembe. I'm making you a co-host, Fumani, so that you can, if you need to, share your presentation. Let me just check. Yes, you are now set as a co-host. You can switch on your microphone and your video, and you have the right to share your presentation. Please switch on your mic, unmute. I see you've done that, and switch on your video. Wonderful. We can see you loud and clear and hear you loud and clear.
Share screen. Okay.
Share screen. We're all getting to grips with this new technology. You know what? I've got a feeling that Stanley may not have unshared his screen. Stanley, can you unshare your screen, please? Are you there, Stanley? Aha, I can now see that Stanley has unshared his screen. And if you could share your screen now, Fumani.
Can you still see and hear me? I'm trying to share screen.
Yes, we can see. Yeah, we can see and hear you loud and clear.
Just give me a moment. I'll try again.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. trying again.
Sure. Yes, it's coming on. Yes, you're on screen. Thank goodness.
Great. Okay, so does this mean you'll be, can you see my notes as well?
Yes, we can see your notes.
All right, no notes will be shown on screen. I'll just have to remember what I wanted to talk to.
That's excellent.
Right, let's just get into that this doesn't distort anything. Great. Super, so I think it's clear to everyone. Thanks, Chris, lovely meeting you. And thanks for the invitation to be a part of this event. I'm really honored. And I think I speak also on behalf of my organization, Knowledge Billy, when I say that it is an honor to make a contribution to this platform. What I'm talking to is social and economic or socioeconomic development benefits of the renewable energy sector. I think from a technology perspective, mine is not necessarily to make a case for renewable energy. I think the case is pretty clear. And indeed, to the extent that there are drawbacks and benefits to renewable energy, the same applies to other technologies. And this is why the integrated resource plan speaks to an energy mix. I think the lesser known conversation is around the development impact in particular of the renewable energy sector. And that's really what I want to focus on. And I think the main thing that I want to draw attention to today is that the geography of utility scale renewable energy power has the ability really to deliver a kind of spatial development that is aligned with the broader transformation objectives of the country. And in particular, I think the kind of contribution that utility scale power makes in terms of its geographic profile allows for capital to flow to parts of the country that historically have been underdeveloped. So that's really the story that I want to anchor on. I think a part of the renewable energy story as it pertains to development that has also been well, let me not say not well articulated, but not fully understood, is that I think we speak often about energy as a consumption story. So, it's about what we want to consume as a society. And of course, going through load shedding, that's an even more pronounced need. But good development is not just about consumption. Primarily, it is actually about production. And so the story around renewable energy ought not to just be about procurement, but really about an industrialization strategy. And so the conversation earlier on, I think, spoke quite neatly to that idea, because what Stanley was talking to is the sort of predictability of the process of procuring power. The predictability, but also the constancy of that. That's required in order for us to become more than a consumer of power, but a real and genuine industrialist in the power space. So those are the two ideas that I'll keep coming back to. The requirement for us to be a producer, talking about production as a development imperative, and then really focusing on the question of South Africa's geography as quite critical to understand in the story of inequality and in the story of persisting underdevelopment, and why renewable energy deployed at a utility scale has the power to really start to address some of put crudely, the apartheid geography of South Africa. So just for context, I speak on behalf of Knowledge Billy. I'm the managing director of the firm. It was established in 2009. And so we have a 10-year track record and footprint in the context of the renewable energy sector, which is really to say that we've basically grown and followed the sector's trajectory from the introduction of the procurement program. As an entity, Knowledge Billy's focus is on developing township, peri-urban and rural communities. And what we mean by developing them is that our real focus is on facilitating the process of those communities transitioning away from being residential hubs into economic hubs, or rather not only residential, but residential and economic, which is a core concern for us. And that's how I think we've understood a chunk of the development problem in the country. How we know that? Research. That's one of our core capabilities. We conduct a lot of research. We've spoken to over 10,000 South Africans across the country, and it's our core business to know the needs and assets of communities that find themselves on the periphery of South Africa's social and economic life. And so that's our core competency, and ultimately how we convert that into something usable for the renewable energy sectors that we work with IPPs predominantly, as well as mining clients who have similar characteristics in terms of their geography, in devising strategies, developing development programs, and then we also play a direct investment role in industrializing those communities. This slide just gives you, sort of a pictorial sense of what I'm talking to. This is our geographic distribution, and also our development model as it sort of stacks up from research all the way up to advisory and investment. But the core part of the conversation is this. It's a story of geography, inequality, and development. As I've said, I really want to emphasize this, and I think it's something we ought to internalize as South Africans, because I think we talk to rural development very often, but not with a clear understanding of what it is we mean. We understand that we have rural communities that don't share profile with urban communities, but I don't think we're entirely clear about what a new kind of development vision might look like. And this is where I think renewable energy at a utility scale has something to offer us, and particularly I think in answering the question of the capital that needs to flow into those communities to then unlock every other opportunity. To do this, I think I want to tell, in my own words, a tale of two cities. And I want to talk to two communities that I've lived in. I grew up in Daveyton and eTwatwa, and those are communities on the East Rand, neighboring communities on the far East Rand of Gauteng, so basically the eastern edge of Ekurhuleni. And then I also spent some time as a student in Brighton and Hove in the UK. Now, as communities, both communities have the same size population or similar populations, and the populations are, as you see, just on average around 280,000 people. Of course, Brighton has an advantage in the sense that it is about 2.5 times the size geographically of Daveyton and eTwatwa, and it might explain why it has 2 universities, where the same doesn't exist at all in Daveyton. But what I want to draw attention to are some of these key economic traits or figures that I've drawn out. The GDP of Brighton is known, and it sits at around $13.86 US. The GDP of Daveyton is not known, and I've had to sort of extrapolate by as many levels of inference from the GDP of Ekurhuleni, which is the local municipality that Daveyton falls under, and then from that figure out the contribution that Benoni makes, Benoni being the town that is nearest to Daveyton, and then I've made the assumption that perhaps Daveyton contributes 10% of what is ultimately counted as the Benoni contribution towards Ekurhuleni. Even at that number, the GDP for Daveyton and eTwatwa is substantially less than 10% of Brighton and Hove, sitting at 800 million. And I'm highly doubtful of this number because I am from this community. I know what it looks like, and I know how different it is from, even sort of better parts of South Africa. Nevertheless, even if this was the case, that Daveyton generates a GDP of $800 million on a per annum basis, it wouldn't suffice on a per capita basis, given the size of our population. our unemployment rate, again, extrapolating from Ekurhuleni's unemployment rate sits at 29%, whereas Brighton is at 4.5 and possibly less, because what they report on as unemployment are people who seek an income support from the state. And those are not necessarily people who are totally outside of employment. They may just be underemployed. Main industries, Brighton and Hove can reliably claim digital technology to be a key industry, as well as tourism. Davidton, no core industry. Why am I making this distinction? I mean, we know rich countries are rich. What is the value of it? The value of this conversation, I think, is encapsulated in that final piece. And it's about the local government authority. So Davidton's local government authority is Ekurhuleni, whereas Brighton's local government authority is Brighton. And this matters because when we think about local economic development planning, in the context of Davidton, what we're really thinking about is Ekurhuleni. And if you know Ekurhuleni, you know that Ekurhuleni's story is the story of being an aerotropolis, being Africa's workshop, the largest industrial zone on the continent. These are all great things, but they're really concentrated around certain parts of Ekurhuleni and don't tell the story of all our communities and the needs of our communities. And the point that I really want to drive home is that if a community of the same size population elsewhere is deemed sufficient enough to conceptualize as a municipality, and then what follows from that is a level of economic development planning that then allows that community to forge ahead and create a path for itself that results in local economic sustainability, then there's something in our structure that is a hindrance. And I say this not to ask for a complete rethink of our local government structure, but to highlight the fact that what we understand to be community, a space that is community, is not necessarily understood as such by the state. And there are actual consequences, development consequences that flow from that, because communities are not empowered or organized in a way that ultimately results in their seeking economic development independently. This is really fundamental and again speaks to why geography is critical to understand as a driver of development. And so in continuing the point then, what I'm really highlighting in the context of South Africa is that apartheid spatial planning really does persist. And so peri-urban, township and rural communities continue to function as labor reserves and not economic hubs. They're not sustaining. And of course, the added tragedy is that if you're of that community, from that community, someone like myself, in order to access opportunity, you have to leave that community. And so what happens over time is that there's a regression in human capital because there's simply no economic activity. What I'm really critiquing here is a highly centralized understanding of development. And it's a kind of development that mattered when the country's focus was about securing a minority population and creating economic activity in the hubs in which those communities were concentrated. But South Africa now is about 100% of its people, and it no longer suffices to have a spatial understanding of the country that is still very much a concentrated understanding. So why does utility scale renewable energy matter? In this instance, what I want to do is not have a conversation that is sort of located at the macro level. I want us to go into a community context, and I'll talk to a case study. It's one of the communities that we work in. I'm taking us into that community just so we can understand in very granular detail what it means when a large asset is located in a community that is remote and without economic activity. So the point is this: utility scale RE is really the microcosm of what is the macroeconomic possibility. What I mean by this is, and we're looking now at the community of Dosrefid. Dosrefid is in the Western Cape, although many of us won't know that because it really is in rural Western Cape, and it's a community of 8,000 people, and also happens to be host to CPV1, which is a 36 megawatt solar power plant, which was awarded its license in the first bidding round. This power plant has changed the destiny of Dosrefid in a really fundamental way. But what I want to talk to, apart from the obvious, right? It is a community that had no employment opportunities before that, or very limited employment opportunities. And the construction of the power plant resulted in about 250 jobs. Of course, the construction period was short-lived, and what really continues to sustain the development of the community is a socioeconomic and enterprise development and investment that continues to be made by CPV1 and is a 20-year commitment to the community. The point is this, by having to locate in these remote areas, because these projects require such large tracts of land, what becomes possible for our forgotten communities, or really small communities, often communities that emerged out of perhaps industries that once existed and no longer do, or some of them just traditional communities that have always been there. What we have is a new opportunity. And so when we think about, for example, the SIDS program that the state has introduced, infrastructure-led growth that has an emphasis on rural development, there's a unique place for the renewable energy sector, because it has the ability to not only solve the power problem, which is a core economic infrastructure problem, but it also has the ability to respond to the capital inflow question as it pertains to rural and peri-urban communities. There are challenges, however. And when I say there are challenges, what I'm saying is that, you know, it's not nothing in development flows organically. There is no such thing as trickle-down economics. Good economics is highly planned. And so when you look at these two community, or let me say, when you look at the asset, which is CPV1 in relation to the community that hosts it, you know, CPV1 is obviously a profitable asset. And if you look at the average IRRs of round one projects, they're very healthy, but the returns to capital far exceed the returns to society. The GDP of Dosrefid is negligible, if not regressing. And so the question that we have to solve, or let me say this first. What we understand about inequality is that this is where it's located. The power of Piketty and what he's shown the world is that when returns to capital exceed returns to society, inequality grows. And this is the fundamental problem of South Africa. We're very good at creating this kind of dichotomy. And the reason that organizations such as mine exist is because we exist to solve for this problem. Ours is to sort of bridge the worlds of capital and community so that the returns to society increase as a function of the existence of capital. In other words, to solve for inequality, it's not enough to be an activist, it's not enough to even point it out. One has to think about how you solve it. And how you solve inequality is really driven by three things. It's about human capital, infrastructure development, and industrial development. And the whole point of my presentation is to say these three things need to be funded, and they need to be funded at the most local level. Human capital development, infrastructure investment, as well as industrialization need to happen in villages, in peri-urban communities, in communities that are so remote that we've never heard of them, communities such as Dosrefid.
Can I please ask you, Fumani, if you could wrap up now? We've reached our time limit, and it's been a fascinating discussion, but if you could quickly wrap up, thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this, as it said, would have been a really granular kind of exploration of the kind of benefit that's been delivered to Dosrefid over the past 5 years. And I'm happy to go back to it should there be questions on it. But the crux of my argument has simply been this. It's important to use utility scale renewable energy for industrial and large-scale development. I think the thing that we need to understand is that development scale and impact can be achieved through a diffusion of energy assets. Historically, the understanding of what constitutes scale and impact has been concentration. And we need to really change our understanding of development in response to our very local context to understand that we can still deliver the estimated impacts, whether it's the 450 billion rands in investment, the 200,000 jobs, but we need to appreciate that good development in the context of South Africa can no longer follow a highly concentrated model. And the beauty of renewable energy executed at a utility scale is that it takes capital to precisely the communities that most need it in South Africa. And in this way, I think we solve a spatial development problem and something that is central to what makes South Africa unstable, which is inequality. And that's it. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very, very much, Fumani, for really giving us insights. And I was particularly taken by, the need not only for consumption, but really for production. And that doesn't mean to say production in massive factories. It can be small enterprises, micro enterprises, medium enterprises at the local level, at the community level. And I think that is so true, that electricity should not be just a drain on people's disposable income, but should actually be a source of income through productivity and at a small, medium, and large scale level. So I really, that was my takeaway from a very fascinating presentation. I would ask, please, if you would put up your hand, if you would like to speak, and I would like to acknowledge Alia Kasim. Alia, I hope you're on the line. I'm going to allow you to propose your question directly to Fumani now.
No, but I can see the office is closed till Friday.
Please, if everybody else can mute, to allow Alia Kasim to pose his question. Alia, put your microphone on, please. Are you there, Alia Kasim? Okay, we seem to have lost him, and but there is a microphone on. I think Jacob Mbele, your microphone is on. Jacob, if you could switch your mic off. And if anybody would like to pose a question to Fumani, please put up your hand. I'm looking to see whose hand is up at the moment. I don't see any hands up. Fumani, have you done such a job that nobody's got a question? It's hard to believe. Let me just see if there's any questions posed on the chat line. Yes, there are some questions on the chat. Thomas Garner says, a fascinating presentation. Fumani. You may remember Thomas Garner is the chairman of the South African IPP Association, and you've alluded, Fumani, to the work that IPPs do in IPP projects to a commitment to social and economic development for a 20-year period. So Thomas says, fascinating, Fumani. I would like to discuss it further with you offline. So it seems like the questions you're being posed are so tricky and so sensitive that they can only be posed offline. Thomas, thanks for that. I'm sure Fumani would be more than interested in engaging with you offline. Are there any further questions for Fumani? I don't see any other hands up, unless I'm mistaken. Let me just check again. And let's see if there's any other questions on the chat. No, hang on. I do see some more. Chantal Naidu from the European Climate Foundation asks, how can the renewable energy IP, so let me start again. How can a renewable energy IPP program be reprogrammed and repositioned as a procurement vehicle to place the social development and inequality at the very center of the stage?
Should I go for it, Chris?
Yes, please, Fumani.
So, I mean, I think it is important that the program is reframed, and I think in part what I've attempted to do today is is just that, and perhaps, you know, there are stories about the program that are lesser known. I do think that the ways in which utility scale renewable energy projects locate in remote parts of the country, that is a big part of the reframing story, because it's possible to deploy, you know, 3,000 megawatts of renewable energy as 50 projects. And you know, that's really quite important to understand, because that means 50 potential communities as opposed to, you know, one community. And, you know, one of the remarks that I would have made is that, you know, developing, in my view, multiple villages as a function of multiple, let's say, wind farms is definitely a far better development strategy than one mega project and one township. That kind of concentration mentality has resulted in a lot of inequality in our country. It's really an unsustainable outcome. So I think that there's a story around geography that has to be told. I think the other thing that needs to be done, which would move the sector forward, is a real commitment to measuring and monitoring impact. This is something that is poorly done across the private social investment sector. When I say it's poorly done, the state gives these obligations to the private sector, and what is then monitored is really how much money is spent as opposed to the impact. And I'm a very, very firm believer that what's needed is a strong collaboration between the state, the university sector, and the private sector. And when I say the university sector, I mean university and research sector. But you need to have the likes of the HSRC and actual universities involved in the process of articulating the types of development projects that are invested in, and then also measuring their impact. And when I say that articulation is necessary, it's because, you know, socioeconomic development is not about charity. It's not about the largesse or discretion of an IPP. It requires a kind of vision, and it requires research, and it also requires an understanding that, you know, if we can do this, as Knowledge Billy, my goal, the goal of my team, is to try and do things really well over 10 to 20 communities. I think, you know, over the next 10 years, that's probably the maximum number of communities we'll be in. But we're doing things well because we're actually trying to demonstrate what is possible on a policy level for scale. The state ought to, at some point, come in and say, oh, okay, we see that rural industrialization works. How did you do it, and how do we then scale it for the rest of the country? These can be powerful policy experiments, and that's how we ought to shape it, so that we say, look, yes, we're a renewable energy sector and it's a procurement program, but we're in it not just to develop power plants, we're also in it to solve some really pressing development problems that happen to affect remote, rural, and peri-urban communities the most. And that's what we're going to solve for, and be strategic about both objectives, as opposed to leaning very heavily towards the one, which I understand, we need to consume power, but we need to solve other problems, and we can do both. And I think that's what we ought to be saying.
Thank you very much again for that insight, Fumani. I just see a comment here by Silas Zimu. Silas says, great presentation, Fumani. By the way, I also studied at Brighton and Hove, so it's wonderful. We are even connecting, you know, people from the alma mater, you know, on this webinar here down on the southern tip of Africa. It's a great experience and an honor to be part of it. So thank you, Silas, for that comment. I see one, an important one that I would like to tackle, and there are many questions, very many questions. I'm just trying to find it now. It was from Jesse Burton, and I somehow can't see it on my screen anymore, Jesse. Please repost it. Mark Swilling asks, Professor Mark Swilling, he's on the board of DBSA. He's a professor at the University of Stellenbosch, says, Fumani, can you reflect on how it will be possible to increase Black ownership from the current 40% to a much higher percentage? And how can this be done using local share ownership vehicles? Over to you, Fumani.
So I'd say in response to Professor Swilling, you know, the real concern that we ought to have is not just about ownership, but operational capability. So I would start by saying when we re-articulate Black ownership, we need to couple it with operational capability. What we're targeting always when we ask that Black people become owners of assets is to localize capabilities. That's the ultimate goal. You want to know that, you know, if all these foreign IPPs were to leave the country, the Black people that have owned these assets over time have the ability to operate them and keep the lights on. That is the fundamental risk that we have today. And so I'd say my first concern would be not only to change the scorecard in terms of increasing ownership, but I'd first say ownership and operation. And I'm certain that by doing that, we'd have a new kind of industrialist emerge, which would be a Black entity that isn't just capable of raising capital from the IDC or indeed the DBSA, but also has engineering, asset management, construction, all those core capabilities that drive a power plant. These are capabilities that exist in our economy, but currently don't sit together. And that for me is the first priority of what I do. In terms of how you increase the capital, I guess, that's available for Black people to own more stakes. I mean, I think that's a question that has to do with the entire structure of capital that's available. Institutional capital needs to become available to Black shareholders. Right now, the standard playbook is to go to a DFI and then try and raise, you know, that additional contribution from smaller outfits. And so there is a huge constraint as it pertains to Black shareholders accessing capital. And I think the pool needs to be greater. We'd love for commercial banks to not see, you know, sort of Black investors and Black IPPs as a risk, and to also come and sort of sit side by side so that it's not just the DFIs that are taking that responsibility. And as I've said, I think the institutional sector, the pension funds that sit with a lot of money, need to become invested not only in the stock markets, but in the core and real economy. And that's where energy assets sit. These are the things that are going to drive development in our country. And really, if we want sustainable development, and if you want, you know, if you're invested in the stock market, in order for that to perform, I assure you, you need to have infrastructure development, you need to have human capital development, and you need to have industrialization. Those things are happening in the real economy. And so it matters that all the capital that's available in the country takes more seriously what is happening in the sector.
Thanks, Fumani. Listen, I think we're going to have to draw an end to the discussion, but I just want to read out two comments. They're not questions, so they don't need an answer. But a comment from Maloba Chela says, brilliant storytelling, Fumani. A journey we definitely need to take. Just as electricity is becoming distributed, so too must be development. So I think that's a wonderful summary of the stories that you told, the examples that you gave. A comment also from Jesse Burton, wonderful input. South Africa needs to build 170 gigawatts of wind and solar over the next 30 years. I see opportunities to bring opportunity to rural areas, to coal regions as they phase out in areas where cheapest possible electricity will allow for development in new sectors like green hydrogen for chemical and steel. Making capital more responsive is an imperative part of the just transition. Justice means sharing benefits differently, but we need a framework that allows these different models to evolve, to be responsive to different opportunities. Jessie, thank you for that wonderful contribution and comment. Again, she said to me, there's a comment only, doesn't require an answer from you, Fumani. I think you've answered a lot of questions about social and economic development, and it's imperative as we move forward and not just be in the bulk electricity business, but to try and use this opportunity to address the many other social needs of South Africa. Fumani, thanks for that. If I may ask you to please share your screen before you go. Thank you for that. And to also put your microphone on mute. I'm going to just move now to our next panelists. Fumani, I'm going to just withdraw your host permissions, and our next presenter, or set of presenters, set of three presenters, the first being from the Department of Trade, Industry and Commerce. That's Mr. Gerard Fourie. He's going to talk about the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan. He's going to be followed by his co-presenter, Noma Quaith, who's also online. She's from the Department of Mineral Energies and Mineral Resources and Energy, also talking about Sarum. And finally, on Sarum's front, Heather Son from the Green Cape. So three fantastic presenters dealing with a topic that is at the very forefront of South Africa's planning process. And I'm very excited to hear more about it. So Gerard, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make you a co-host, which I'm doing now. And you have got 5 minutes of your 15-minute slot to present on behalf of the DTIC. Gerard, I hope you can, yes, I see your microphone is on. If you would like to share your screen, please do so. Otherwise, you can just talk to your presentation. It's up to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity. So basically, can you still see my screen?
We can not see your shared screen. We can see your name on the screen. Can you try sharing your screen?
I'm sharing my screen.
Okay, at the moment, we don't see your shared screen. We just see your name. You have got co-host rights, so you should be able to share your screen, Gerard.
From my side, it looks like I'm sharing it, so I'm not sure what the challenge is.
Gerard, I think proceed anyway. Unfortunately, it does not look like to me anyway that your screen is being shared on the side. Are you still trying, Gerard? Gerard, have we lost you? Can you still hear us, Gerard? Yes, we can now. Your screen is now being shared, Gerard. We're just waiting for it to come online. It says here you have started screen sharing, but it's still not showing your screen on my screen anyway.
Okay, so maybe I should just start, if you don't mind.
Please, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity. I'd just like to give you a bit of background on the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, what we've done so far, and I think it will be quite useful. The framework that you follow in a master plan might be useful for the renewable energy sector. And we've heard today that there's quite a lot of fragmentation in the renewable sector, and the minister specifically requested that we participate in the broader energy sector in a much more coordinated way, and we basically have a much more formal way to engage with government. And that would be quite useful, I think, following the master plan process. So basically...
Gerard, can I just interrupt you to tell you that your screen is now being shared and we can see it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So basically, a master plan is implementation mechanisms or an implementation plan that follows a specific framework. And this basically came out of the reimagined industrial strategy for South Africa. And the Department of Trade and Industry acts as a coordinator of master plans, but we are not the leaders of master plans. It's important to understand that master plans are stakeholder driven. So the stakeholders basically play a very important role in developing a master plan, but also very important is that it is based on research and it's based on facts. And the point that you've made over and over today is it's not about lobbying. Now, I think what would be interesting is if we look at the governance structures of master plans, there's first of all a broad consultative working group of interested parties. And this is typically where you develop ideas, you develop a vision, you basically identify the obstacles in the industry, recommendations are made, and research is done. Then the first real formal layer in a master plan is what we refer to as the industry reference group. So this consists typically of industry experts. These experts are from government, labor, the sector itself, and academics. And the role these experts play is they act as a soundboard, and they act as a group that guide research, and they guide the industry in the effort to develop a master plan. And then the important structure in this is what we call the Executive Oversight Committee. This is typically chaired by a minister, and in this case, it would be very nice if the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy can chair it. And there are a number of other captains of industry and leaders of labor, for example, that sit on this Executive Oversight Committee. And this is where you have to make, we basically strive to get agreement, and where decisions are taken. And what we've seen in other master plans is if you can provide sufficient evidence, it becomes much easier for industry, labor, and the political leadership to make decisions and to come to an agreement. And once they've shaken their hands, it's often quite easy to start with the implementation of the master plan. So just a little bit more detail, what exactly is a master plan? It is basically a mechanism to bring industry, labor, and government together. It is based on evidence and ideas to get a common vision on the opportunities, targets, objectives, and bottlenecks, for example, in the industry. And the main objective, of course, is to encourage sustainable investment in the sector, to identify employment opportunities, skills, development requirements, to identify national, regional, and international opportunities. Importantly, to deepen industrialization in the sector that will lead to value add in the South African economy. So it must have an massive economic input. And in the energy sector, we know that is possible if we can localize and industrialize the production of the goods that we require. And then I think it also has a longer term vision. Where do we see, what do we see beyond the current horizon? Where do we see opportunities? Do we want to export energy or electricity to Africa? Do we want to export products to Africa and the rest of the world? And then an important point I'm just mention in the context of this renewable energy master plan is the public-private growth initiative was started as a collaboration between government and business in 2018, and the main focus is to assist with the development of master plans. And what we've seen is in many cases, once you can get business together, it becomes very it creates quite a bit of momentum, and it becomes very useful to get pick up speed and to drive a master plan going forward. And in the renewable case, the business community has played a significant role so far to get the momentum going in this space. So with that, I would hand over to Norma from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Am I on? Chris, am I audible?
We can hear you.
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay. Basically, moving on from what Gerard was saying, we're looking at the Renewable Energy Master Plan as basically following the same format as other master plans. It's an opportunity for private sector, for government, labor, community, including civil society, to create together and enable catalytic growth in the economy using the renewable energy technologies. We also looking in one of the objectives within SAREM is proposing a social compact that acknowledges that renewable energy industry will need to play a holistic role in the rebuilding of the economy. That goes beyond the megawatt capacity. So this is something that really is in line with what has been said throughout the day today, where we are. I think it's been captured beautifully by Fumani in her presentation that precedes ours just now, where we are saying we're looking at the contribution of renewable energy to broader societal development problems. And so some of it, while we may capture it as how many megawatts the IPPs have contributed, but we also have to go beyond that and talk about other interventions that have come as a result of introducing renewables. Gerald has indicated that the DTIC does the coordination and they are the secretariat for all the master plans. But for each sector, the ministry then would be responsible for overseeing the energy, the renewable energy master plan. We're working in collaboration, in close collaboration with the DTIC, but we, as a Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, we're responsible for providing oversight of the development of the master plan, and that makes us accountable for the completion of this task. The consultation process, I think with all the, what makes the master plans effective is the consultative nature that is used in the development of the plans so that we get the consensus that's required. Just back a little bit, Gerard. Okay. So we want to be sure, we want to ensure that it's validated and championed collaboratively by government, industry, and labor. From the inception phase, we set out to work together on this path. So in terms of that, or to make sure that we work together, there is a governance structure that has been proposed, wherein we have the executive oversight, which is supposed to be chaired by the minister. Then we need, for the Renewable Energies Master Plan as well, we need to establish that reference group, the reference group where we have a core team of technical leads. Because it's a small group, I think, Chris, you said it very well in your introduction that for substantive issues, you cannot do it in a large group. So for the reference group, we need about 10 to 15 committed technical experts to assist. And these can be drawn from industry, academia, the departments themselves. In that, I think we need to, I just forgot to add the Department of Science and Innovation. Then we have an industry working group, which is it's a larger group of stakeholders. From my side, on my left-hand side, I think your hand, Gerald, can go to that column there, the industry working group, where we would have it's a larger group that would be used for consultation, and that would also inform whatever the smaller group does, and that will be drawn again from the broader stakeholder group that we have already indicated. So there will be a lot of consultation. We would also work with experts that can be that would be identified. There will be some small research assignments that may be needed, wherein we would need to draw on those experts. So to put it together, then there is a project management team that is overseen by a project committee from the key stakeholders that are involved in the development of the master plan. So the project management team would always consult on behalf of the entire renewable energy master plan group. They would consult the individual stakeholders as well as the broad associations or representatives of the different groupings. Then we would, all of that would be taken back to, reported to the Executive Oversight Committee. We can go to the next slide, Gerard. Then this is basically my last slide. So what we have, what we have discussed is that we need, it's important that the enabling and restraining factors are identified and dealt with. So in focusing mostly on the enabling factors that we have identified, the issue of collaboration and consultation is key. And for us, with as we start with the Renewable Energy Master Plan, we see this particular platform as one where we are introducing the work that is being done. Of course, we're adding on to the number of people that attended the meeting that was held at Galaga Estate last year. So we're hoping that by ensuring that everyone through this group as well is aware of what is being done, that you may be able to then indicate, raise your hand and indicate where you think you can be able to add value or advise us on on some of the things that need to be taken into consideration. So we also, so through this consultation, we see this platform as a consultation. We also see one of the enabling factors being a conscious definition of representation of industry. I'm not too sure. We've seen today a large number of presentations from the various groupings, but what we want to emphasize with the development of the master plan is that we need to make sure that throughout the value chain there is a good participation in the development of the renewable energy master plan. We need to be successful within government. There needs to be champions that would assist, who would assist in ensuring that the document, the output that is envisaged is credible enough, and the interdepartmental cooperation that we are already showing here, wherein I think the main leading departments would be the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, DTIC, as well as Science and Innovation. So that collaboration is critical, notwithstanding the fact that we do need contributions from other stakeholders. So from my side, that is what it is. Thank you so much for your attention.
And thank you to Koma from the Department of Minerals and Energy. I think we're getting a strong message from the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, the people that are working on this, that it really needs the support and engagement of the Minister of Minerals, Energy and Resources, Mineral Resources and Energy, to play a leading role in the Executive Oversight Committee of this Master Plan that is being developed for the renewable energy sector. So thank you very much for that, Koma. And I'm now going to call on Heather Son. She's from Green Cape, and I'm busy changing your role to be a co-host so that you can talk to us, Heather, and tell us, give us your input, hopefully for not more than 5 minutes. We're running a bit late on this.
Good. Thanks,
Thank you, Heather.
I think Gerard's going to keep the presentation up, but I don't know what starting video will do. So yeah, there we go. So we've got both. Okay, so I've got 5 minutes. So firstly, just good afternoon, everyone. And the section of this presentation is allocated to Green Cape. And as most of you would know, Green Cape is an organization that was set up to support and promote the green economy, in South Africa, and I've been a board member of Green Cape since 2014. I was approached very recently, probably hours and days, to take up this role. And I think the role that has been identified is to serve an oversight function of the master plan process. And as I can understand what the master plan process is meant to achieve, it has to be sufficiently inclusive, engaging the stakeholders, ensuring that we have adequate representation, that we stick to the timelines that are set out, that the deliverables are of an adequate and suitable standard and quality, and that to the extent possible, we can keep moving the process forward. So identify the obstacles and move them forward. So I am going to do my best. I've got a steep learning curve ahead of me over the next few days to get completely up to speed, but I have had some engagement and think I have an understanding of where we are now. So the steps in the process are set out in the following 3 slides. I think the first slide indicates that it will start from a very broad perspective, which is a vision for the renewable energy sector for 2030, and then a longer term vision for 2050. So broad engagement has to take place here. I understand some engagement has taken place and others have received a methodological approach and will be engaged to get their inputs. I can say at this stage that I was encouraged by some of the feedback, because I think the feedback illustrates an understanding by the sector of the complexity and the importance of the role that renewable energy plays. So it's not just about how it is good for the sector, but how consistent and low-cost energy contributes to the economic development of South Africa, and how, if we don't have an approach that includes community, societies, business, and government and labor, it's not going to be a robust outcome. And I think some of those are the early indications from the feedback, and I was encouraged to see that. From the vision, it moves down into smaller and smaller pieces. The first is objectives, then pillars and focus areas for actions and interventions, policy enablers. It's obviously critical that government forms a part of this group, and then formulating a social compact. And this, I hope, will be achieved, and trust will be achieved, because all the stakeholders will be engaged throughout the process. And then the implementation of monitoring and evaluation. All throughout, ensuring that we identify where there are quick wins, where there are medium-term objectives, and how we can think about the longer term. In terms of timeline, the slide indicates that we are on month 0, but discussion this morning, we are actually on month 1. The engagement has started. The research phase will be initiated. The key points there are that we have to map the research that has currently been done, that has already been done, and research that is currently being done that matches the timelines of this group, so that we don't recreate the wheel. So I was interested to see what Stanley had to say earlier, and also encouraged to hear the questions about looking cross-sector, because renewable energies plays a role in the economy of South Africa, and so engaging with the research and understanding how where the renewable the role that we play in the sector as a whole. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. I'm trying to speak within my 5 minutes. I'm going to take a deep breath and get the points out clearly. Gerard, can you go back, please? I just want to make sure I'm done with that slide. So the research phase, to ensure that there is alignment with current research being done, and not to recreate the wheel. Work with research, and that mapping exercise has to take place. And I understand there is some work being done on that at the moment. Stakeholder consultation will be ongoing throughout the process, and the darker shading indicates, like, for example, at the end of the research phase, a re-engagement with the group again to share the outcome of the research and to get inputs before moving to the master plan formulation, and then of course the validation. Excuse me? Gerard, I think you are not muted. And then the validation process is through the engagement with the various stakeholders. The consultation process, the stakeholder mapping is currently underway. I'm taking a keen interest in that to ensure that the stakeholders are identified and engaged. In the larger group that Norma spoke about, which is called the Industry Working Group, there currently is already a list of people who have identified, indicated their interest. It's about 140 names. We will work with Chris to ensure that members on this group are identified and included in that. And then obviously ensure that we have done our best in terms of identifying the groups that need to be represented. A smaller group, the industry reference group that Gerard spoke about, will then have to be constituted, and that I know can lead to some challenges and delays in the process. And I think we have to orientate ourselves towards our mission, and our mission is to contribute successfully to the catalyzing effect that energy has on the South African economy. And ensure that we have a representative grouping, and we are happy with who we have in that group, and we can move forward with momentum. So we will cross that bridge in the coming days and weeks. But I hope and trust, and from what I see, we will address it with a very constructive outlook. After the research phase, there will then be a consultation on findings, and then the social compact process with government, labor, private sector, and communities, and then a publishing of the South African renewable energy sector. So that brings us to the end of this section, and we will be available for questions. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very, very much, Heather, for a really insightful discussion, of which I think I can personally learn a great deal, because it is so important. This engagement process, which we are embarking on with the renewable energy sector, and we would love to work closer with you, because we think we've got a lot to learn from you. And the message coming through again that the minister is really being urged to play a role as the executive in charge of the executive oversight committee of the renewable energy master plan for South Africa. And we look forward to seeing how this develops. I do have one question here on the Q&A, and it comes from Roberto Ceccuti. Roberto is a senior executive at the European Union delegation to South Africa. He's involved with trade and industry. So I think this is a very important stakeholder, and he has also been extremely supportive in this particular initiative. As you will see, the European Union flag on the program gives an indication that they have played an important supportive role to South Africa. He says, thanks for the explanations from DTIC and DMRE on the master plan, and of course from Green Cape. What is the role of foreign companies in the governance structure outlined? Industry is inclusive of both domestic and foreign companies. An interesting question that I hope you can address, either yourself, Heather, or one of your colleagues, Noma, or Gerard. Don't forget to switch on your mics before you speak, but if there's any one of the three of you that would like to respond to that question, I'd be grateful. Can you switch on your mic, please, Heather?
I can say, and I don't know if Norma and Gerard want to add anything, but I can say that I've taken a look at the stakeholder list, the original list that needs to be expanded. And I do see that there's representation of quite a few OEMs, So my understanding is that at least from the outset, the idea was that this grouping needs to be as representative as possible. Norma and Gerard, do you have comments on that?
Please don't forget to switch your microphones on if there's any comment from Norma or Gerard. Okay, it looks like not at the moment. So I'm going to proceed on to the next question, which is from Sai Gora. Remember Sai, she's the president of the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers. And she asks the following: will the master plan detail the projects as well? Also, a plan has been gazetted to install 2,000 megawatts generation capacity to be operational and grid connected by December 2021. Is this included in the master plan? Would anybody like to take this up? Heather or Noma? Don't forget to switch on your microphones, or Gerard, if you would like to answer this. Anybody want to pick it up?
Hi, I think I'm on.
Yes, you are. You are on.
All right, thank you. We have not yet started with the content of the master plan, but the intention is not to contradict any existing policy or plans of the department. Remember, this is the focus, it's more on the industrialization. So we will be talking we would not be talking to issues of the policy that the department has already developed, the IRP that is already in existence, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Koma. Is there anybody else that would like to comment, Heather or Gerard? Ladies and gentlemen, I think that brings an end to the discussion and to the three presentations. Remember what they were all about. We started off with Stanley Semalani talking about the just energy transition, or shall we say the just transition. This was followed by Fumani Mtembe from Knowledge Pele. She talked about the need for social and economic development alongside the development of renewable energy projects to create not just consumption, energy consumption, but also energy for productive use at a community, at an individual, small, medium, large scale level, in towns, in villages. And she gave us a wonderful comparison between what happens in two different parts of the world. And then lastly, we've had this talk today about this new process to develop a master plan. Now, there are a number of master plans, and one of them is the Renewable Energy Master Plan. And Gerard Fourie from the Department of Trade, Industry and Commerce, Noma Quest from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and Heather Son from Green Cape have given us a demonstration of collaboration across government and NGO, civil society, how they can work together in the interests of South Africa. And I hope the renewable energy sector can work together with government, with the financial sector, with the private sector to harness these partnerships for the benefit of our country. So thank you very much for from our presenters. It's been an absolute honor to have you on here and to give us your insights. And we now move on, if I may, to the real substance of what we are trying to achieve today. And we're at that stage now. And I must tell you, it's 25 to 4, and I intend to go on till 4:30. The reason for this is we took an extra half an hour over the lunch break, so we're going to run an extra half an hour over time. But there are two major issues that we need to deal with. I want to deal with these one by one. And the first of these issues is to chart a way forward for a renewable energy sector engagement forum of a smaller group of people. The hard question is always, how should it be structured? Who should be represented on this forum? as it engages on an ongoing basis with the minister. The minister has made it absolutely clear, even today in his discussions, he needs a single point of contact with the renewable energy sector, so that when he needs to engage, he can phone them up and engage. And of course, this cannot be done with a group of 150 people. We've had something like 150 people today on this webinar. At the moment, we've got 106 people on this webinar as we speak. So I'm going to put on the screen a proposal that I've drafted in consultation with a number of people in the renewable energy sector. So if you can just bear with me while I share my screen with you. I hope this is going to work. Let's just see how it goes. Yes, I see that. And I'm sharing my screen now. And I hope everybody can see this. It says that I'm sharing my screen. And if you can let me know if you can't see it. But I think people can see it. Can everybody see it?
Yes, Chris, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, so that hopefully people can see it even better. There we go. So, as I mentioned to you, the real objective today is to set a process to establish the structure of two bodies. One is the Ministerial Renewable Sector Engagement Forum of about 25. I've just thought of 25 seats as a number. You may indicate whether that's too few or too many, or what you think. And of course, somehow these 25 seats have to be occupied by people who will act not in their own interests, not in their own commercial interests, but in the country's interests and the broader sector's interests and the national interest. Now, I see such a forum as being having the seats taken up by stakeholder groups that are representative of wider constituencies. That's how I see it. So this is I see this as a stakeholder forum representing a number of maybe subgroups and members, etc. And I've kind of taken a figure of 25 seats and I've allocated them as I kind of thought. And you may have different thoughts. And I would like to engage with you today and take questions on the chat facility, where I will try and respond to your questions and to the points that you've made. And we've got half an hour to do, or let's say 15 minutes to do this. And then at the end, I'm going to take a poll where I'm going to ask you your opinion. And we're going to record what this group before us have to say, 115 participants at the moment. So what I'm proposing is a group of 25 that will then be available to the minister on an ongoing basis when he needs to engage with the renewable energy sector. I must stress that this forum, I've often been asked this question, is this an energy forum or is this a renewable energy sector forum? Does it cover the broad energy, nuclear, coal, gas, wind, solar, battery storage, biomass, and liquid fuels, all of these different primary energy sources? And the answer is, I asked this question directly of Minister Mantashe. And I said, Minister, what are you looking for? Are you looking to engage with the renewable energy sector through this forum? Or are you looking to engage with the whole energy sector? And he was very, very clear and specific. He needs to engage with the renewable energy sector through this forum. There may be other forums that deal with other energy carriers and energy, primary energy sources, but this particular one that he's asked me to facilitate is for the renewable sector. So I just want to clarify, we're not talking about the broader energy sector. There may be other such forums, and that's the business of these other sectors within the energy sector, subsectors within the energy sector. So what I put on the screen here is my kind of view. And of course, there can be many, many differences of opinion, and I'm sure there are. but somehow we've got to structure 25 seats or however many seats there are and spread them out in a way that is reasonably representative and legitimate. So you will see the different seats that I have proposed, and you'll see it crosses all the boundaries of the organizations that we've had speaking today. So we're talking about government, we're talking about DMRE, we're talking about other government departments, we're talking about ESCOM, municipalities, industry, business and professional associations, organized labor, civil society and NGOs, DFIs, commercial banks, 2 seats, as you see, for South African industrialists, then also a seat for academia and researchers, and then lastly 4 seats, which I've said to be rotated on an ad hoc nominated basis, where you bring in key representatives as may be required depending on the issues that are being considered at that particular moment. So that gives a bit of flexibility to bring in different players with different skills as and when needed. And so I'm saying that is an option. It's one option. Is this reasonable or is it not reasonable? So I'm very keen for you, please, to indicate on the screen, through the question and answer, pose your question, pose your concerns. Please do this on the question and answer, the Q&A facility, and pose your questions short and sweet, please. Address, and we'll see whether we can even get you to answer. We can engage live. I'm just having a little bit of difficulty. I might have to move this off the screen and unshare it in order to be able to engage with you properly. Just 1 second, please, as I struggle with this technology. I'm just trying to get it organized here. 1 second, please, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing at the moment. It seems to be, I'm losing my way with this technology. I'm going to stop sharing, and that's better. Now I'm back to where I think I should be. And I'm going to, you can either put up your hand, as I see Andy Carlitz has done, or you can pose a question on the Q&A chat program. And I would like to ask you to express either your interest, your support, or your recommendations for changing the structure. And I would like to just read out a few comments that have been rolling in. I see a comment here from, bear with me, I'm going to ask a few of the questions. Oh, they're coming in thick and fast. 1 second, while I scroll back. I see a comment from Kiran Maharaj. She says, Chris, the minister said he wants to engage with the energy sector, not just the RE sector. Kiran, I must tell you very clearly that I asked this question directly of the minister, and he indicated to me directly in response, Chris, he said, please facilitate this for the renewable energy sector. So I want to be clear. He may certainly want other forums for the wider energy sector. He may also want an overall energy sector forum. But the one he's asked me to facilitate is for the renewable energy sector. I want to make that absolutely clear. I see a question here from Terence Govender. Hi, Chris. I think the number of seats will need to be tested. I agree. It will need to be tested. He says here also, Terence Govender from the Renewable Energy SAREC, the South African Renewable Energy Council, he says, I think the number of seats still will need to be tested, but it looks good as a start for now. And yes, we have to start somewhere. And these things will have to evolve. I agree with you, Terence. I see a question from Johannes van Niekerk. 25 may be too many. Why not only 15? And then you have 6 people with vested interest in the industry and only 1 independent research input. Yes, may I say, first of all, I've looked at a smaller amount, but I just don't see how I can satisfy a proper legitimate representation with less than 25. That's my personal view. Of course, my view is not important. You've said there that there's people with vested interest in the industry. Yes, this is a stakeholder group. The first group I'm talking about is a group of stakeholders. Stakeholders, by definition, have a stake in the industry. They have a vested interest in the industry. They are not independent, but they are representing constituencies. Each one of them is in some way representing a constituency. So the stakeholder forum itself does have people with vested interest in the industry because by definition, they are stakeholders. That's the way I see it. You may feel differently, and I appreciate your input. And he goes on to say, Johannes says, perhaps we should first agree on the role. Is it to inform or to lobby? In my opinion, it's not to lobby. It is to represent broadly the wider sector, and its focus should not be on lobbying, but on serving the common interests of South Africa and the national interest, and not to fight about technologies. This is not about fighting about technologies. Other technologies may have their own forum. This is simply making, the role of this forum will be to try and unlock the barriers that are blocking the rollout of renewable energy, which is the official policy of the government of South Africa as expounded in the 1998 white paper, the 2003 renewable energy paper, the 2011 green economy accord, and the 2019 integrated resource plan for electricity. These are all in place. The problem is that the industry is not moving forward, and the purpose of this forum is to unlock any barriers that are preventing the rollout of government policy. Question I see here from Samson, your name, I cannot get my tongue around it. My Western tongue struggles. I'm going to try. Msengedenzi Zeni. I'm going to call you Samson because it's easier for my tongue. My apologies. He says, what informs the number of seats per sector? Samson, I can only say I took a stab at it to try and make it balanced. It's not informed by science. It's informed by, I hope, a reasonable understanding of the sector and to ensure adequate representativity and balance. Nothing more. It is only my opinion, and I'm certainly, my word is not the last word on the matter. Hoda Mustafa asks, can one of the private sector seats specifically include the foreign investor community? Hoda, in my opinion, and it's only an opinion, there is a seat for for development finance institutions. Many of these DFIs are international. So we have the World Bank, we have the French development, the French DFI called AFD, there's the German DFI, there's the BRICS Bank, the New Development Bank. There's a number of foreign financial interests, and there is a seat for them on here. I do think the foreign missions to South Africa play more of a supportive and an observing role than a participatory role. That's my personal opinion. What informs the number of seats? I think we've dealt with that. Can the private sector be specific? Yeah, foreign investor community, I've spoken to that. Mike Levington says, hi, Chris. Oh, where's he gone? Hang on a second. I'm just getting back to you, Mike. I'm just looking. Where are you going, Mike? Hang on a second. Scrolling through. So many comments coming through, and I really welcome them. Mike, we'll get to you. Andy Carlitz asked, Chris, the words your renewable energy should be inserted before industry, business, and professional associations. I think the point Andy is making, that only professional associations that are involved with renewable energy should be part of this group. I wonder what you think. In a way, I think you're right, but let's just look at an organization like Eskom. Eskom is involved in renewable energy. It's the biggest customer of renewable energy. It also generates coal and nuclear power and diesel generators and all of these things. But I do believe that Eskom needs to be part of this forum because they happen to be the biggest customer of renewable energy in South Africa, and they play a critical role going forward. So I don't know how we're going to deal with that, Andy, but that's something that maybe have to be dealt with. Terence says, Chris, SAREC supports this initiative. We're happy to be part of this working group up front as we represent key associations and growing. Terence, may I say the working group is a much smaller group which needs to be free of vested commercial interests, in my opinion. I hope you're suggesting that you wish to be part of the Renewable Energy Engagement Forum, this forum of 25 people, which is not the working group. That is the actual forum itself, which is a stakeholder forum, and SAREC and its associations are certainly stakeholders, in my opinion. Thomas Garner asks, Chris, I think there should be another seat for another government or other departments. There should be 3 for them. Yes, I put 2, and maybe there should be 3, because there are a number of other government departments that are key, like Treasury, like the Department of the Environment and Forestry and Fisheries, like the DTIC, and like the DPE, the Department of Public Enterprise. So there are a number of government government departments that need to be representatives, and maybe 2 is not enough. I agree. I go along with that. Precious Mapela says, what is the answer to the question? Is this strictly a renewable energy forum? Precious, I want to say it for about the 3rd time. Clearly, the answer is that the minister asked me to establish a renewable energy forum. He may have ideas of having a broader overall umbrella forum, which you might call an energy forum. But what he has asked in this engagement today is for a renewable energy forum. And I'm also proposing a working group to draft the terms of reference and the agenda for this forum going forward. So I hope that answers the question again as clearly as I can. It is a renewable energy forum that the minister has asked me for. Mark Swilling says, I support the proposal. Chantal Naidu says, the presentation depends on the purpose of this group. Is this primarily for the minister? Please recap what he needs it for and why. I will try and explain this. Chantal, yes, it is primarily an engagement forum between the minister and the renewable energy sector in South Africa. Why do we need such a forum? We need such a forum because at the moment, the rollout of renewable energy in South Africa has stalled and is not proceeding for a number of bottleneck reasons. We need to identify these reasons, work out solutions with the minister. The industry, not we, the industry, the sector needs to work out solutions to the bottlenecks with the minister and engage with the minister. The minister has indicated to me that he wants a single point of contact with the renewable energy sector, like he has with the mining sector. He does not have this with the renewable energy sector. So that is the purpose. The purpose is to have a point of engagement between the minister and the renewable energy sector to unlock the bottlenecks that are currently inhibiting the rollout of government policy and planning initiatives. We have the IRP, we have the policy frameworks, but it's still not happening. Why? We need to find out why, and we need to address it in consultation with the minister in a cooperative way where there's trust between the parties, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So I hope that answers your question, Chantal. I see a question from Roberto Cecuti. Roberto, remember, is the European Union delegation to South Africa. He's responsible for trade and industry. He says, as the EU representative to South Africa, I would argue that the one post allocated to DFIs should go to the European Investment Bank, the new European Climate Bank, which can bring on board all other DFIs from other EU member states. In addition, I would be favorable for having the EU Chamber of Commerce in South Africa to also be included in the group. Thank you, Roberto, for those comments. I wonder how the Americans and the British and the Chinese would feel if there was one seat to go to the European Investment Bank to represent European interests. I think whatever representative is brought to bear, I think we'll need to have the support, not just of the European, but wider, and that the person on the forum should speak as a representative broadly of DFIs and not just of European DFIs. My personal opinion, somehow we've got to accommodate such a huge variety of stakeholders. Vickers Kruger says, there was a reference by Chris and the minister earlier to the Minerals Council, which specifically represents the mining industry. They can talk with one voice in the sector and for their sector and industry. This forum seems composed of so many different representatives, including government, that it will struggle to fill the same role. So is the forum's role to play a similar role to the Minerals Council or something broader? Vickers, my opinion, for what it's worth, the mining industry is 100 years old and more. It has got very formalized and structured central bargaining and central coordinating, and it can do this because this is largely an organization of operations, of operators. And I don't know whether it is broadly composed of the much wider interests that are necessary to set up a new industry. And when I look at the renewable energy sector, it's much more diverse, much more players. The financial sector plays such a critical role because it is such a young, new, and immature sector in South Africa. It is more mature internationally, but in South Africa, it's still very young and immature. And as such, I think if you were just to leave it to those that are producing electricity, renewable energy electricity, that means the IPPs largely, I think you would be missing the boat. To have an engagement forum comprising a group of IPPs. I think at this early stage, we need it much wider, and therefore it is very different from the Mining Council, the Mineral Council of South Africa, and more complex. But also there's a strong need for it because the minister needs to engage. So the challenge is out. What do we do about it? Sure. Ntumba Katabua says, for DFI, I nominate the European Investment Bank. Thank you, Ntumba. Point noted. It's not for me to make these decisions. It's for the DFIs collectively to nominate somebody or one or two people to represent the broad range of DFIs. Okay, I move on. Sai Gora says, if required, give the 4 or less seats to any organization that is, oops, I seem to have lost it. Where I'm trying to go back to you. My goodness, this technology. Vickers, Tumba, Saigara, if required, give the 4 or less seats to any organization that is critical, and the ad hoc is only as required if necessary. I agree with you. The ad hoc should be brought in as and when needed, depending on the subject of the discussions of that particular meeting of the forum. Mandy Rambura says, thanks, Chris, a sage proposal. Remember, Mandy is from Eskom. Thanks, Chris, a sage proposal. The Eskom, the Eskom Just Transition Department, the newly formed department. It would have been great to have 2 seats for the Just Energy Transition Office and from the technical side. Renewables unit. Oh, yes. Okay. She recognizes, I recognize the concern about the collective numbers, though. So she's recognizing that there needs to be a limit of numbers, but she says Eskom needs 2 seats, one for the Just Energy Transition Office and one for the technical side of renewables. Point taken, Mandy, point noted. Terence Govender says, agreed, yes, a forum of 25. Okay, one could say 30, one could say 15. I sucked my thumb and said 25. Greg Babaya, remember Greg? Greg made a presentation. He is from the Association of Renewable Energy Practitioners. He says, Chris, the proposal looks heavy on the people that are making policy and how the proceeds of the renewable industry get spent. I don't see anyone who represents the people whose money is going to be invested in this sector. Lenders are there, but no institutional investors are represented. A big flaw. Well, I don't know, maybe, but I do think we should. You'll notice there is a representative from the Banking Association, the banks, that I would think something like the Banking Association of South Africa, BASA, who presented today. They represent all the commercial banks in South Africa. Then you have the DFIs. I also have a seat for them. So I think the lenders are there, and maybe also the lenders, I agree with you, maybe there needs to be things for example, green investment funds. I don't know. Good point taken. We have to think about it. Vickers Kruger, here's Mike's Levington comment again. Oh, thank you, Vickers. I seem to have lost Mike's comment and now I've got it again. Mike Levington says, hi, Chris. I think the governance structure of SARAM may solve the process that you're suggesting. I agree. I think that SARAM, we've got a lot to learn from a very interesting consultative process that they are engaging in extremely thoroughly. And I take the slogan from the SARAM documents to move forward at the speed of trust. They are spending so much time in establishing trust and process between the stakeholders, and it's a very, very critical and important moving forward. Maloba Chela, I hope I got that right, Maloba. Hi, Chris. The entity that represents the interests of major players in the renewable energy space already exists, that being SAREC. Surely SAREC should lead this engagement forum and itself consult with a wider pool of related stakeholders. So SAREC leads as the entity representing renewables, and then it is tasked to engage and consult more broadly for related matters and consult more broadly for related matters and take those considerations into discussions with the minister. Maloba, in principle, I agree with you, but I do see the renewable sector as much bigger than SAREC. And I also note that there has evolved over the last few years a very hostile relationship between the minister and the renewable energy in associations. I think it's a reality that has to be recognized and realize that we need to break this cycle of distrust. And I think, in my personal view, and I know I'm going to be very controversial when I say this, I think there is a perception in government circles and in various political circles that the renewable energy associations are dominated by foreign interests who have only a commercial view and are pushing their own technologies and not taking the national interest into account. And that is part of the distrust that exists, I think, between the minister and the department and other government and political players and the renewable energy sector. And unfortunately, the sector there has been this hostile relationship that has developed that we need to break. And I personally see that the sector is much broader and has to be much broader than simply the renewable energy associations, because frankly, up to now, the renewable energy associations have not succeeded. That is a fact. And somehow we need to break that cycle. And I have been asked, I did not put myself forward. I was pushed forward by the renewable energy sector itself, with the support of the renewable energy sector and with the support of the minister, to try and break this logjam. SARIC has expressed its support to me in this initiative. You've seen Terence Govinder's comments that he supports this initiative. He wants to be part of this initiative. I think it's critical and important. Mike Goldblatt says, thanks for the efforts, Chris. Acknowledging there's no perfect answer, I would support 25-person group. We then ask certain sectors to take responsibility for speaking for related sectors. For example, commercial banks should then pre-discuss with institutional investors and private. I agree entirely. That's my thinking, Mike. Precious Mapela says, what will be the role of this forum versus SARIM? Interesting question. We need to get this forum up fast. I see SARIM is perhaps taking a little longer because it has a much more complex engagement forum. Maybe in future, you know, they are one and the same thing, but they're not exactly the same thing. The South African Renewable Energy Master Plan is focusing specifically on the just transition, but I see a lot of commonality, but the minister needs urgently a forum that he can engage with the renewable energy sector. And that's what he has tasked me to do. Paul Vermeulen asked, Chris, 2 for other government departments, maybe too little. Treasury, DAFF, DTI, DPP are all affected. I agree, Paul, we've discussed this question earlier. That is maybe we need to have more than 2. Maybe we need more than 25 seats. I don't know. We're going to ask you that question at the end. The last question that I've got on this list, and we've dealt with so much, before I'm going to ask you to, we're going to have a poll. I'm really interested. I've never done a poll on Zoom before, and we're going to see how it works. I hope it works. Nadege Hopman asks, EIB, where's this? EIB supports this, where is it? EIB supports the initiative and the 25-member group. We would also be honored to represent the DFIs. DFIs, should this be suitable to the DFI community? Is there another DFI in the room interested in the seat? I don't know. We've also got to take into account people, Nadega, that are not in this room. This room does not represent every DFI out there. But I do know that the World Bank has been, was certainly in this room. We had people from the World Bank's industrial, loan section. I forget their name; it's just escaped my head. But people like Saki Lemke and others were here, and I'm not sure if they're still in the room. But certainly, the World Bank is a vital and interested DFI in this sector in South Africa. And I know that they are engaging with Eskom and government at this very time as we speak. So it does certainly extend further than just the European DFIs, Nadega. A last question. Paul, this is the last question. On behalf of Valley, Chris has given the role and numbers of municipalities with respect to renewable energy. 1 seat is not sufficient, noting the diversity of municipalities, and municipalities consume 42% of the country's electricity and collectively. Okay, so Paul Vermeulen from City Power, a member of the AMEU, is suggesting that there's not enough municipal representation on this forum. Point taken. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're running out of time very fast. In fact, we're over time. I'm going to try and do a poll now with your support, and I hope this works. But I'm putting on the screen now a poll. I want your opinion, please. You should see this on the screen. I hope you can see it. Can you see this on the screen, everybody? Can anybody tell me, is it on the screen?
Chris, yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Okay, question number 1. Do you support the establishment of an ongoing smaller representative ministerial sector engagement forum comprising stakeholder representation? Here we're talking about this group of 25 or so. We're going to get to the number just now. Can you indicate, do you support the establishment of an ongoing, smaller than 150, representative ministerial renewable energy sector engagement forum comprising stakeholder representatives? Yes or no? Please indicate whether you support this initiative. Yes or no? It's a very simple question. I see so far we have 19 people, 21 people now voting that they do support the establishment of this forum. 26 people now, and at the moment nobody is saying no. Only people are saying yes. This is a very encouraging sign that people do feel the need for this forum. So please, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got your poll on your screen, please indicate what you want. At the moment, we've got 33 people answering question number 1, 36 people now, not a single one is saying no. Moving on to question number 2. Is the proposed number of 25 seats for the ongoing Ministerial Renewable Energy Sector Forum, is it too few? In other words, it should be a bigger forum. Is it about right? Or is it too many? Well, I can see at the moment that very few people are saying it's too few. There are some people, 2 people are saying it's too few, 5%. 76% are saying it's about right. And 19% are saying it's got too many people, it should be smaller. But it's not for me to say, it's for you to say. It's for you to please put on your vote and tell us what you think. Okay, so question number 2, remember, is 25 seats too few, about right, or too many? Okay. So while you're busy voting on that, I'm moving on to question number 3. The question is the stakeholder representation structure that I have proposed, and remember, it's not for me I don't make the final decision, but is this, it says here, is the stakeholder representation structure of the proposed ongoing Ministerial Renewable and Sector Engagement Forum, is it adequately balanced? Does it cover the different stakeholders in a reasonably fair way? We're never going to all agree that it's perfect, but I just want to know how reasonable you think it is. This is more evenly positioned than the others. So in this case, at the moment, 57% of respondents are saying it's adequately balanced, and 43% are saying it's not adequately balanced. So it needs a bit of rework, tweaking based on all the comments that I've heard today. And then the last question, would you give the green light to proceed with the establishment of this Renewable Energy Engagement Forum? Yes or no? Is this legitimate that we proceed? And I need to know that there's adequate support in order to give this at least some degree of legitimacy. And I see the answer to the questions there, that 93% people have said yes, they would give the green light to proceed. And 7% have said no, they would not give the green light to present. Please, I'm going to give you some more time, ladies and gentlemen. I would value your participation, as much engagement as we can get. It's important to hear your voice. You've heard all the discussions today. You've heard all the arguments. You've heard the engagements, the comments, the feedback to this important issue. So I'm really asking you to please respond to this poll. Every one of you, to indicate your opinion. And I'm busy making notes as we speak as to what the outcome is in general. And I know there's still a few votes coming in, but I'm saying for question 1, 8% is too few. 74% is about right. And 18% is too many. That's the outcome of question number 1. Question number 2, is the stakeholder representative, sorry, no, question, no, that's, sorry, I think I'm getting myself confused here. Let me just scroll up. Just get my act together here. Yeah, so let me go start at the beginning again. Question number 1 says, do you support the establishment of this forum, the smaller forum? And the answer is 100% say yes, they do support it. And 0% say no. That's question number 1. Question number 2, we're talking about the number, 25 seats. Is it too few, about right, or too many? 8% say it's too few. 74% say it's right. And too many, that is too big, 17% say it's too big. That's interesting for me. That 25 seems to be about the right number according to the significant majority. Question number 3, is it adequately balanced or not? The proposal that I've made to you. And 59% say it's balanced. And 43, let me get this right, 58% say it's balanced, and 42% say it's not balanced. And the last question, number 4, would you give the green light to this? 92% say yes, and 8% say no. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that answers the first poll. And I'm now going to talk to the next issue. I'm closing the polls now. And I'm going to bring onto the screen, I'm going to share the screen. If I can figure this out, please, just bear with me. Oh, damn it. I'm going to share a screen again. There it is. I hope you can see this screen. Can somebody tell me that we can see the screen?
You can see it.
Thank you very much. I'm glad everybody seems to be able to see the screen. This is the second proposal. It's a proposal for the structure of a drafting subcommittee for this Ministerial Renewable Energy Sector Engagement Forum that we've talked about previously, comprising 5 qualified renewable sector subject specialists who act in their personal capacities free of commercial vested interests. So it's proposed that the drafting subcommittee would be to prepare an agenda and a discussion paper for matters to be addressed at the next and further ongoing meetings of a legitimate representative Ministerial Renewable Energy Sector Engagement Forum, as previously talked about. So this is what we're talking about here, is a small working group of specialists that are free of commercial vested interest, that will prepare an agenda and a discussion paper for the ongoing work of this forum. And I've listed below, and I hope you can see them, a number of what I think are some possible focus areas for the forum, but it's not important what I think. This is just to put on the table and say, this working group, here's some ideas, but it's your job. You've got to work out this position paper, you've got to work out an agenda and a discussion paper, and you've got to present it to the forum to kickstart the process of engagement with the forum. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these things, but yeah, you can see them on the screen. These are things that need to be dealt with. Maybe I could just highlight the last 2 items, or let's say the last 3 items on this agenda, because I believe these 3 items are playing a critical role in constraining the renewable energy sector. There are the financial constraints of government, Eskom, and municipalities, including government guarantees. At the moment, the minister has said to me and to others that he's ready to proceed with round 5 of the renewable energy IPP program, but there's a problem. And the problem is that the financial institutions want government guarantees, and government is constrained fiscally and doesn't want to provide these government guarantees. So what is the problem? What is going to happen? How do we move forward on round 5 when government cannot provide the guarantees? There are solutions out there. There are solutions. Moving to number 11, how to address the problem of the single buyer model when the single buyer is an insolvent off-taker. What does it mean when you want to enter a 20-year power purchase agreement with a single buyer who happens to be insolvent? What is the bank's attitude to lending money to a developer to deliver electricity on a 20-year power purchase contract with an insolvent off-taker? Well, the implications are that the lender is going to say, I'm not prepared to lend to that developer to deliver electricity to that off-taker unless the shareholder of the off-taker provides government guarantees, because the off-taker itself is insolvent. How do you deal with this? Because this is holding back round 5. And of course, it gets to the whole issue of the fact that we have at the moment a off-taker, a state-owned entity that is insolvent, and it is not independent, and it cannot perform the role of delivering power between a willing producer and a willing buyer who happens to be creditworthy, because in the middle stands a middleman who's insolvent. So the way to address this, of course, is having an independent transmission system and market operator separated from the insolvent entity, and to try and create a diversified competitive generation sector. And the minister indicated in an interview with me that this is what he would like to see happen. And I believe that it is necessary for this to happen. So these are just some of the many issues. What I think is important is not important. What is important is that the renewable energy sector engages with the minister to address these bottlenecks. So getting back to what this is about. Do you support the formation of a working group comprising specialists acting in their personal capacities who are free of vested interests to draft a discussion paper and an agenda for the forum for its ongoing work over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and more? Do you support this or not? So I'm going to now put on the screen the second poll, if I manage to do this. Hang on a second, end polling. I hope you are able to see this on the screen. This is the second poll that I'm conducting. Can somebody indicate to me whether they can see this on the screen? It's called Polling 2, Drafting Working Group.
Chris, not yet. It's not showing.
Is it not showing? Okay, I'm going to try and see what's happening here. It's showing on my screen. Ah, I know why it's not showing. It says launch polling. So I need to launch the polling.
There we go. Now we can see it.
Ah, you see, I'm learning this technology every day, every day. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in principle, do you support establishing a drafting working group to prepare this agenda and discussion paper for the ongoing work of the forum? Yes or no? That must be free of vested commercial interests. Please indicate whether you support in principle. The details still to be resolved, but in principle, do you support it or not? We're not talking about the details, the number of people on the forum, on the working group. We're just asking you the question as a principle. Do you support establishing a drafting working group to prepare an agenda for this forum comprising subject specialists that are free of commercial vested interest? And by that, I mean, they're not invested in the industry financially. They're not suppliers of equipment. They don't have they're not trying to sell something. They are specialists sector specialists. And here I'm really thinking about the many highly reputable academia in this field. I'm thinking about researchers. We have a group of incredible researchers, not just from the SCSIR, but researchers from other bodies, including universities who do research work. There are a number of, I know personally about 10 very active researchers that are free of vested interest, that are steeped in this renewable energy sector and have got a lot to contribute, and they can contribute with their brains that they have at their disposal to identify and prepare this discussion paper and to prepare an agenda for the working group to start, for the forum to start considering. So question number 1 is, in principle, do you support this working group? Yes or no? Question number 2, is the proposed number of 5 qualified subject specialists for the drafting working group on the Ministerial Renewable Energy Forum, is it about right, or is it too few, or is it too many? Should there be more people part of this drafting working group? Is it about right, or are there too many? Please let me know by voting. And the last question, ladies and gentlemen, before I start recording the answers, would you give the green light to proceed with the establishment of the proposed drafting working group to prepare an agenda and a discussion paper for the ongoing work of this forum? Yes or no? Will you give us the green light to proceed? Yes or no? Remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about establishing a forum to engage with the Minister on renewable energy and the issues that are blocking the rollout of renewable energy, which is government policy, part of the plan, but it's not happening. For various reasons, there are blockages. That's what the forum is about, unblocking the blockages, helping, advising the Minister, engaging with the Minister to do just this, and to set the agenda for this engagement forum. We need a team, a small team of people that are free of commercial interest to draft the agenda of this forum. And I think the votes are essentially in, and I'm just going to make some notes as we talk. So number 2, this is poll number 2. If I may just get my book open to record the results. So I'm not sure if you can see the voting and the polling, but you can see there that on question number 1, 86% says they support the working group, in principle, that we should establish such a working group free of vested commercial. And 14% say they don't support it. On question number 2, is the proposed number of 5 qualified subject specialists, is it too few? Well, 38% say it's too few. 62% says the number of 5 is about right. And 0%, nobody says it's too many. 0% say it's too many. So yeah, I think, it's clear the majority are saying that 5 is about right. 38% saying not big enough, needs to be bigger. Okay, I take your point. And then lastly, the question is, do you give the green light to establish this drafting working group? 88% said yes, and 12% said no. Sure, guys, this is a huge achievement, I think, that we've done today. And we've reached the stage really where we're at the end. It's at 4:30 at the moment, which was really where we wanted to be at this time of day. Maybe we're running 5 minutes late. I'm going to stop the poll, end the polling, and close this thing. Bear with me, please. How do I do this? Oh, yes. polling. Let me try and figure this out. Oh yes, there we go. I've closed the polls, and I'm going to stop sharing that screen because we've dealt with the two proposals on the table. And I want to thank you all for a marathon session. It's been hectic for me setting this up, but I think it's been productive, and we've reached, I think we have a clearer idea of what you think and what the way forward is. So I'm going to say thank you for your time and effort, and I'm going to hand over to Mr. Navesh Govender. Navesh, as you probably know, is the Executive Director of the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association. I had to choose somebody to do the honors and to thank you all and to close this engagement that we've had today. And I would like to call on Navesh, and I'm going to promote him. You are being promoted to co-host, Navesh. Yes, you are now a co-host. Please, will you be so kind as to switch on your microphone? I see that's on. You may want to switch on your video if you want to, or you can just speak verbally, but I'd like you to please do the honors and thank us. But before I do hand over to you, may I also just put my name to thank the people who have really facilitated and helped us today. That is the 4 of the renewable energy sector forums that comprise SAPVIA, SAWIA, SAIESA, and SAEPA, South African IPP Association, as well as my thanks to the European Union delegation to South Africa, who've given me support with no strings attached, and also to the British High Commission, who've supported this process and are here as observers today. And they've done this with no strings attached whatsoever, I can assure you. I wouldn't have taken their support if there were strings attached. But they have been very supportive, and they've been observers today, and I thank them for their role. Navesh, can you switch on your microphone, and over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Today has truly been an information-packed day. I think through the day we've heard the many benefits of renewable energy, the representation structures through the many associations that have been present, the willingness of government to engage with us as a sector, the concerns and challenges that we face as a sector, and at the end, some of the solutions that we have come up with to move forward. With that said, I would like to thank firstly you, Chris, for all your efforts over the last few weeks. You have done an exceptional job in coordinating this event and having the many relevant stakeholders participate in this conversation. I would also like to thank the Minister in his absence. Even being a COVID patient now, was able to honor this commitment and engage with us. I would also like to extend that thanks to the DMRE colleagues for availing themselves, DG Mokwena, DDG Mbele, and the rest of the team. On behalf of Renewable Energy, or as part of Renewable Energy, we look forward to engaging with you and having fruitful engagements in the future. I'd like to thank the presenters for their knowledgeable contributions, and this will definitely foster future-looking thinking by all of us in the sector. To all of the associations, I think the support for renewable energy is clearly evident, and the conversation should not stop here. Personally, I look forward to engaging with each of you to further and ensure collaboration going forward. And then finally, just to thank everyone who has tuned in and stayed throughout the discussions. I thank you for joining the discussions and participating. And with that, Chris, I'd like to close by saying I wish everyone a great day further.
Navesh, thank you for those words. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my duty now to close the meeting, and thank you once again for staying till the bitter end. It's been a long and hectic day in this engagement, and I really commend you for your participation and engagement. To all our presenters, to the Minister, the DG, the Deputy DG, the foreign missions that have been observing and supporting, the industry associations, and the many people who've played a role, our presenters, and given us a day that I think has been incredibly productive. And I hope to think that we have indeed achieved our objectives today of getting some direction on how we move forward. Thank you and goodbye.